Caywood, and tonight I'll be giving a speech on allowing cell phones to be used in schools. In today's society, everywhere we look, people of all ages and genders are parading around with their cell phones in hand. Whether we are driving, walking down the aisle in the grocery store, walking down the hallway at school, or even in the class, people have their cell phones with them. However, it is always controversial in the classroom whether cell phones should be allowed to be used or not. Students enjoy texting during class, while most teachers aren't fans of it because it is disruptful and it throws the teachers off in their teaching. As a student in an age where everyone has a cell phone and everyone is always attached to their cell phones, I know how big of an issue that this is in the class. The issue of allowing cell phones to be used will never be solved because it always depends on how the students control themselves with their phones. Although cell phones can be a distraction, cell phones are also valuable in schools. The use of cell phones in school can be beneficial to students, parents, and teachers alike. Cell phones are an electronic device that are used for making long-distance phone calls, but now, with modern technology, cell phones now have apps where people can play games, listen to music, or even browse the internet. Personally, my phone doesn't have the internet or any of these apps, so that's not a distraction to myself or anyone around me while I'm using my phone. All cell phones today can either be set to vibrate or silent mode, so that if they go off, not everyone around you will hear them. And this wouldn't be a distraction to the teachers that are teaching, it wouldn't disrupt them, and it wouldn't be a distraction to the other students around you. Today I will show a few reasons why cell phones should be allowed in schools. Cell phones can help in a variety of ways, such as if there were an emergency, the students and their parents could keep in contact, and students could use their cell phones in projects and lessons in school, and students could stay in contact with one another. First, I will discuss how valuable a cell phone could be to a student in an emergency situation. If students were allowed to use their cell phones in school, it would allow for a safer environment if an emergency were to occur. Family education states that kids could reach authorities in case of an emergency, and parents could know the whereabouts of their children in a time of crisis. In an emergency, a student could simply reach into their pocket or into their backpack and call for help. Janelle Few wrote in Savannah Morning News article that 9 students once called in 22 false bomb threats in a matter of 2 months. Unlike these children, most responsible students would only call in if there were an actual bomb threat or a dangerous situation. Next, I will tell about the ways in which students could use their cell phones for class activities and projects. Students would also be able to use their cell phones for school projects and lessons to improve their technology skills in the class. Tara Malone and Lisa Black wrote in Cell Phones Increasingly a Class Act of one student who used his cell phone to measure the porosity of a cupcake in a science project. The student had the cupcake in front of him, he took a picture with his cell phone, and then using Photoshop, he measured the bubble of the cupcake and then figured out the porosity of it. Matt Ritchell and Brad Stone wrote in a New York Times article that a wireless industry trade group, CTIA, performed a study where they gave students in a low-end neighborhood very quality phones that were capable of all the devices and technology that these students needed in their math classes, so they could help them through that. This shows the companies and students both are pushing for cell phone use to be allowed in classrooms. At the American Legion Boys State of Kansas, where I attended in June, we used a new type of polling called text polling. This was used instead of having each member of a 400-member camp fill out a ballot individually, and that would take a lot of time between each counting of the votes. So the speaker up front would set up a poll online where they would have a number that the students would text in, and each selection or choice for an answer would have a different code to it. So the students would type in the numbers and the code and then text it to the Boys State survey. And this really helped because it was interactive and it kept the students wanting to do this, as well as it was a quick way of doing things. Text polling could also be used in a classroom setting because the teacher could just go online and set up a poll, and she could check how her students were interacting with it and if they were all participating. And the students would also find this enjoyable because you're using your cell phones and everyone likes to use their cell phone. Text polling was very successful because it was a simple way to use a poll. It was quick between the time of send the text and count the number of votes, and it was a fun way for us to vote. Last, I will explain how students could stay in touch with one another. If cell phones were allowed in the classroom and in school, students could keep in touch with other students and parents alike. In an experiment by Judy Peterson in the book Cell Phones in the Classroom, A Practical Guide for Educators, 80 to 90% of students who had cell phones had the capabilities of texting. These students could use their phones to inform another student of an assignment or a test coming up if, say, the student wasn't at school that day because they were sick or had an activity. According to Scholastic Magazine article, Cell Phones in School, the Do's and Don'ts of Mobile Education, 62% of parents said that they would buy a mobile device for their child's education if students were allowed to have phones in school. In conclusion, I hope that I have persuaded you how and why cell phones should be allowed in school. There are a number of benefits to allowing cell phones to be used in the classroom. I have shown that students could keep contact between their parents and themselves in an emergency, and that students could use their phones for projects and lessons in school, and how they could be able to keep in touch with one another. If students were allowed the privilege of having their cell phones in the classroom, they would be responsible in how and when they use their phones. I hope that I have persuaded you why cell phones should be allowed in schools in this day and age. Thank you.
Did you do it?